But I will never forget seeing you and wondering what it was like to sit in that fucking chair.
First day I went home and I was like, what did I just do? This whole stigma of like, what are people gonna think? What are people gonna say? I didn't know about these letters of support, but when they unsealed them for this documentary, I got slapped with 41 letters from people I thought were my friends throughout my career and for years after. And I had been sober for like 7 years, and I just kind of started spiraling out of control, and I finally hit rock bottom and went to rehab. Walking on the street, it's usually like, oh my gosh, can I get a selfie? Cool, thanks, no way, see ya. Now it's like people coming up and be like, can I just talk to you for a couple minutes?
I'm Mayim Bialik.
I'm Jonathan Cohen.
Welcome to our breakdown. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. You woke up today and your hair is no longer curly. I don't know what happened.
I just didn't shower. We hope everyone had a great holiday. We're very thankful that you are here with us. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been here a while, thanks again for listening. This year, we are seeking to cover topics that are most important to you with big guests, with amazing experts. Our team here is working very hard to bring you information that can help you better understand yourself and ultimately how to live a better life. If you haven't already subscribed, we're going to ask you right now to click the subscribe button wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. It's free, and it really does help us bring you more of the episodes you love. We're starting off the year with a particularly powerful episode. It's a topic that has impacted so many people. It was brought into the public awareness last year with a shocking documentary that shook the industry and really rippled out over the whole world. And what we'd like to focus on is what's it like to think you know someone, especially if they're a public person. You know, you think you know what they're like or what they're going through. Maybe you have judgment about them or the way they live their life. Maybe you envy parts of their life. But then you find out that you actually didn't know this person at all. You didn't know what their human experience really was. Maybe they've gone through something that you can't imagine. Maybe they feel trapped. Maybe they feel alone. Maybe they've been tormented, abused, thinking that there's no way out of their pain. Many of us are under tremendous pressure. And that can keep us suffering or hiding or living in a world of shame. If you're the person hiding, we're here to tell you there's hope. There is a way out. Your life can get better and you're not alone. Our guest today had an enviable life and an enviable childhood to the outside world. However, he was going through horrific things that he didn't even know that he should share or seek help for. He didn't know for a long time who he could turn to. He didn't even know how to try and escape from it. And he's ended up bringing hope to millions of people. A lot of people might know this person from watching him on TV. Others may know him from his prolific musical career. And many of him may have first learned about him from the bombshell documentary Quiet on Set. We're going to talk today to Drake Bell. We're going to talk about why he chose to break his silence, about the predatory abuse and trauma that he experienced for years while working on one of the most popular TV shows at the time, Drake and Josh. He's going to discuss what led him to film Quiet on Set, including the reservations he had even while filming it, which he ended up coming to terms with. We're also going to talk about what breaking the silence has done for him, for his career, and ultimately for his healing journey.
He also shares really powerfully the emotional breakdown that he had and the recovery that he went through, a whole month of treatment, getting himself to a place where he could have the strength to get in that chair on that documentary set and share the way he did. Really powerful interview.
And you may have heard other interviews with Drake or other podcasts he's been on. I have to say, we really chose to lean into a lot of the joy that Drake experiences as a musician, as a performer, as an actor, how some of those coping mechanisms of the love of our industry in many ways buoyed him through unimaginable tragedy that he was experiencing. Let's get into it with Drake Bell. Drake Bell, welcome to The Breakdown.
Break it down.
This feels like a good place to talk a little bit about sort of what's expected of a child actor,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it's in some ways not very different from what's expected of an adult actor, but children are easier to manipulate and get to do what you want.
Yeah, of
And,
course.
part of, I'll speak about us.
Yeah.
Part of our job is to be obedient, right? To like do what is, required and not complain, right? So like those are kind of some of the things. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about sort of what you think about, especially now that you're an adult and especially now that you're a dad, right?
Yeah.
What does it feel like to look back and see, gosh, like so much was expected, right, of us, even though
Yeah.
we love it, even though it's enjoyable. Can you talk a little bit about what you remember of expectations about you?
Well, I think the hardest part about it is you're expected to, like, there's no expectation of being able to react like a kid or be able to, like, they're expecting from you what they're expecting from all of these adult actors that have been doing it forever. And this is a job to them. And this is, and it's hard to get that, like, oh, this is my job. You kind of more like, oh, this is my play. Like, I get to go have fun. And, oh, shoot, like, there's a lot of money riding on this. And there's people are going to get upset and you're in an adult world. So I think the expectations, and I think the hard part too is you get a lot of kids in the business who it's like, it's their first job. I had a sort of a luxury move because when I started working on Amanda's show, Drake and Josh started making I started working when I was 5 years old. So I'd been on a ton of movie sets where it's like we're losing the light or we're down, we got to move on. Like this is, and so there's a lot of stress and producers getting upset or actors getting mad and storming off. Like I've run the gambit of being on like stressful situation, in stressful situations on set. Whereas I think like a lot of people that came from like the same background as me on like Nickelodeon or working on television shows when they're kids, is a lot of them, it's their parents' first time on a set, it's the kids' first time on a job, and the adults around aren't taking that into consideration of like, dude, you're not working with some actor who's had a director yell at them before. Like you're not working with some actor who's gotten in an argument with the producer over a decision that they want it. Like, the director wants it this way, but the actor's disagreeing and they get into it and you're standing there watching two people just like scream at each other. But that really becomes in Hollywood, you're just like, no, they're just negotiating. Like it'll be over in a second and one of them we're almost to the compromise and there we go. Can we shoot now? Let's go. You kind of are like, you get used to not that they happen all the time, but you're used to high stress situations because, you're shooting out in the snow, but it's supposed to be summertime, and it's like, oh, it's snowing. We got to wait for it to stop. Or there's just so many situations where you've have experience. But I think that there's so many kids who it's like, it's their first job. And if that's not taken into consideration, it's like, they just had an adult yell at them. Like, they don't know that that's like, and maybe they didn't come in, maybe they were playing video games or hanging out with their friends last night. And,
being a kid.
And being a kid. And they didn't cut, like, the script becomes homework, and it's like, okay, so they came in and they don't have all their lines memorized. Like
kids are irresponsible.
Yeah. And then
my son just texted me that he slept through his exam.
Yeah. I mean, that there you go. And so but then you have these adults who are like, what are you talking about? Like now we have to wait for you to learn your lines. Like, why don't you come prepared? Like, and the kid's like, what? Like that was home, and then there's like this.
Well, so I'm curious, what was that like to be a veteran? Because I didn't start acting till I was 11. I was that kid you're describing.
Yeah.
Like I was that kid who had to negotiate fights in my home, but not on sets, right? I hadn't been in an adult work environment.
Yeah.
Like I was that kid who, when I started Blossom, I was 14. Joey Lawrence had been acting since he was probably before 5. Jenna Von Oy also started when she was super young. Like I was the green one. I had just been in Beaches, but I had just started acting. I had I was that kid. And I can't say that it felt necessarily difficult because it's kind of like a fish doesn't know it's swimming in water. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
just like, this is all what's happening. But I wonder for you, like when you think about Little Drake,
Yeah.
right? Like what was that learning curve like? Do you remember any of it?
I think also for me, like I was always so fascinated with like vintage Hollywood, like the lights, the camera, being on set, the smell of, you know, you walk onto a set, you smell the sawdust and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm home. You're like stepping over cables. You're like, oh, this is home, And my parents I grew up with my parents divorced. They did not get along, bouncing between house and house. And unfortunately my parents were of the era, which this is kind of a blessing in disguise because now with my wife and my son, we're separated and we share him. But I mean, I hate to say that I'm glad that I was brought up this way because it kind of affects how how the relationship is with my son's mom. I'd go to my dad's and my dad would be like, oh, your mom this, your mom that, your mom this, your mom that. I go to my mom's, your dad this, your dad this, your dad this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm half him, I'm half you. So I'm like, so you're basically saying that this person sucks, so I suck. Like there's this whole like thing where when I got onto set, and it's great because now with my son, I'm like, you'll never hear a bad word come out of my mouth about your mom ever. Like, even if we have problems, like your mom's the best, cool, like she's the best, So I think there was this bit of like escape when I got onto set, and I always was an old soul, so I never felt like I couldn't carry myself in conversations with adults. And I think later in life with things that I had experienced and had to go through was sort of that I think is something that people tap into and take advantage of.
What do you mean? Like the ability to
like, there's obviously kids who are on set that aren't going to be talking about, Jerry Lewis, why we have monitors? Because Jerry Lewis invented the monitor. And, that Dick Van Dyke episode. And you like the history of Hollywood. And, have you heard the story when this happened on the set of Chinatown and when Bob Evans did? So you're able to like, and those kind of conversations happen all the time on set where you're talking about like, I heard this great story from the sound guy when he was working with Jack Nicholson. And like, I'm right in on those conversations.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by BetterHelp.
I want 2025 to be filled with growth in every area of my life, podcast-wise, relationship-wise, and of course, personal growth would be nice. Every January brings you 365 blank pages just waiting to be filled. In 2025, maybe you're ready for a plot twist. Maybe there's part of your story you've been wanting to revise. Life isn't about resolutions that fade by February. It's about picking up the pen and becoming the author of your own life. I like to think of therapy as my editorial partner, helping me write new chapters and create a meaningful story that I deserve to live. I've been doing that in therapy since I was very young, and every year there's more to explore, more to learn, more to grow into. BetterHelp is fully online, which makes therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. Access a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. Easily switch therapists at any time with no extra cost.
Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/break today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.
HELP.com/break.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Calm.
There's a lot happening these days. It can feel especially stressful or hopeless when things feel outside of our control. But Calm can help you restore your sense of balance and peace amidst outside chaos. Calm helps me with the big three: anxiety, stress, and sleep problems. Their meditations help me untangle the day's chaos in my brain. And did you know that your breath has a direct link to your reporting of anxiety? I feel more at ease and in my body after their easy and helpful breathing exercises. Calm's the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. Everyone faces unique challenges in their lives. Mental health isn't about a cookie-cutter approach. That's why Calm offers a wide range of content and programs to help you navigate life's ups and downs, like meditations to help you work through anxiety and stress, meditations to boost your focus, build healthier habits, take better care of your physical well-being. There's sleep stories, sleep meditations, calming music that help you drift off to restful sleep quickly and naturally. Also, grounding exercises if you're feeling overwhelmed. Jonathan's always saying we have to do more grounding exercises. He's right. These short guided sessions use sensation, movement, and breath work to help you relax and reset. Expert-led talks help you handle grief, improve self-esteem, care for relationships, and so much more. Calm puts the tools you need right in your pocket and can help you dedicate just a few minutes each day to live a happier, healthier life.
Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. For listeners of our show, Calm is offering an exclusive 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/break.
Go to calm.com/break for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/break. This is a really interesting point. And this is something I've never heard you talk about. And I've never talked about it, but I relate very strongly in that if you are, for whatever reason, and I was called an old soul, which
same.
I've been told by therapists means like you just have ancestral trauma and it's coming out. But if you are able to navigate with adults, it does give many adults a feeling that they're already closer to you.
Totally.
Because you're already kind of like an adult.
Yep.
Like we can talk about things that I'm interested in, says the adult. So I kind of have them already.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, I can also say things that you don't say in front of a 12-year-old kid.
And it makes the kid feel empowered, right?
You're like, oh, well, like I just did a scene with this kid and he just said, F this and F that. Like, you're working on, some movie where the kid's like in situations that, and then when you're offset, you're like, oh, well, I can curse in front of him. I can tell this dirty joke. I can tell this, because it's like they're not really. So there's the ones who I think, and it's a bummer because some of it's totally, I think, innocent. Like there's no malice in it. It's just some of the adults are in a world where they're sitting at lunch and they're like, oh, let me tell you this funny story about how this person was doing this drug on set and then this happened and then this thing happened. They were crazy. And you're like, oh, wait, this kid like probably shouldn't hear this story. But it's also like they're not doing it out of like, oh, hey. And then I think there's the people who are like obviously the predators in Hollywood who are like, oh, I can just, he can come to this party and his parents will feel okay because, hey, he's just an old soul. He's just getting along with the older people. Like, go ahead and drop him off. And then those are the kind of people who, basically see that and take advantage of it.
It's so interesting to think about the things that as child actors we're encouraged to be.
Totally.
We're encouraged to be sophisticated.
Yep.
And we're encouraged to be wise beyond our years.
Yep.
And we're encouraged to, adapt and adopt all of these adult things, such as being cool with people cursing or, okay, oh, they're drinking, but like, oh, it's work time, but I shouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
Right? It starts like opening doors
or also
to
what I saw all the time too is like, you're at a house party, something, and it's like, oh, whatever, they're 16, 17, but like, it's almost like the cool mom. Like, well, you're not at a bar, you're like at the house, like, sure, you can have some cocktails and like, now there's like all this underage drinking happening, but it's just, there's nobody batting an eye. Like nobody's like, whoa, hey, no. No, it's like you're nominated for a Golden Globe and you're 17. Like, yeah, I'm drinking.
It's almost like being mature is a gateway drug.
Totally.
Right?
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
Well, there's no guardrails.
Yeah.
Well, and you're encouraged to be those things. There's nothing. There's no downside to being mature, right?
There's something too where, if you get, which I'm sure you experienced a lot, but like when you get to a certain point and, just think about what it's like to just roam through the halls of a high school. But imagine if that's on a global scale. Now you're like 15, 16, and you're opening up some magazine. And I think like from a male point of view is like young teen heartthrob. What kind of girl are you looking for? What is, and then from like a female point of view, it's just all like, oh, look what she's wearing. Oh, she's gained some weight. Oh, look at her. She's eating it's like a donut stuffed in your face. You're like, dude, I was just with my friends eating donuts. Like, and now it's on the cover of some magazine in like some negative light. Like, but these publications have no problem either. Just like following these kids around and then objectifying them in ways where it's like, even if you think you're glorifying them, it's like, well, now that's the standard I have to keep up with. Now if I even go a little bit to this way, are they going to say that I'm no longer the it girl? Am I no longer the, and that takes a toll too. And I think that that's not something that they prepare. I wasn't prepared for two things. I wasn't prepared for the whole, like, because I mean, I never really, I was acting all the time. And so I never really had like the high school experience. I did for like 4 months. And then I realized that you have to do homework. You have to do like actual schoolwork. I was like, I want to go to high school. I want to experience it. And then they like started putting like papers on my desk. And I was like, I'm sorry, I have my agents. I have to go. They're like, no cell phones. I'm like, oh no, you don't understand. This is a big deal. I really have to take this. So I got out of that. But I wasn't prepared for also, like, because I was working on a network that was geared towards children and young people, was like, oh, well, now you have to be a good example. Like, you have to like be a good example. And I'm like, dude, you guys are the ones that are serving open bar at the rap party and not caring if the cat, like, who's drinking. And then, but I have to go out and like be a good role model. And I'm like, I don't know how to be a good role model. I want to get into trouble. I'm a kid. Like, I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna do stupid things. And then it's all, oh, another child actor does this, and this. And it's just like, there's a lot, it's a lot of that. And I think a lot of like trying to find your own and being like, I have to be a good role model. I have to navigate myself through this adult world, like, and expected to not make any mistakes. And then I think too, there's this like stigma of like being a child, that like you will always be child actor. Like, no matter how many movies you make as an adult, no matter how many shows you host, no matter former child star,
right?
Drake Bell, now hosting blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I did 90% of my career was post 18. Like, it's just, but so there's like all these things and expectations that are thwarted on you. And you're just like, I always think that, if you're going to get a kid into a position where they might become a success, a Malcolm in the Middle, like they're the star of the show, like they need to be sat down and be like, okay, so here's all the articles on this young actor. Here's all the articles on this young actress. Here's all this. And just go through those. Are you prepared to have that done to you? If so, cool. If not, we're going to look for someone else. Like,
and there wasn't the same awareness, obviously, about the trajectory of that experience when you both started. It was like a totally different world.
Yeah.
That was the other thing.
No social media.
I was going to say, a lot of this stuff happened in private, as it were. And there wasn't the same sort of like following. But I also know, and this was something that was, an experience I had differently, because you were on a network that was essentially like a very well-run machine for churning out content, right? And there was a specific formula that was followed, and there was a publicity it was a much more protected world from the outside world of the industry in many ways. I had to walk among, like the Married with Children cast and like, like all these people who were like, having a whole different kind of success than our little sitcom, that was just kind of starting out. But the thing that was fascinating about the Nickelodeon world is it sort of created blockbuster after blockbuster without fail. And Dan he was a mastermind. Right? Of creating this formula that just like clicked with people, clicked with kids, I wanted to ask a little bit more about music, because you've used your music as a very specific vehicle, meaning you've chosen to like dive right into the middle of your life with this phase of your career. And I really like your music, and I like the sound, and I like I love the videos, and I know that they're not all the same, but the videos that I was watching, you're getting to use your acting even as you're singing. And I know that being a performer, of the musical variety, you have to be, presentational. But I really love I love the variety of artistic way that you're kind of going about this phase of your career. But in particular, like Going Away. It's like a very explicit song. And I don't mean to like read into things, but the lyrics are that you're done with this fucking city, and that you really want to be someone else somewhere else. Why did you choose to be so explicit with your music and your lyrics as it relates to what's going on in your life?
Well, with this album, like I said, I didn't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write this album. I had just gotten to my wit's end with a lot of things that were happening in my life. And I don't write journals. I don't write in a diary. I write lyrics, and that's like when I feel like I need to just scream or get something out, I go down to the piano and I just bang it out. And the first song that I wrote for the album was I Kind of Relate. And
I like that
I was
song.
going through it was so dark. And
Mm.
I was going through like just so many personal situations that would just absolutely, I mean, you hear about these things happening to people and it just destroys them. Well, I had like 3 or 4 of them all happening at the same time, like all at the same time. And I was just like, how am I going to get through this? Like, how am I going to get through this? And so I just like went down and I started just like, okay, there's other people that, I'm not in this alone, like other people. So it's like, okay, well, I kind of relate. I found beauty in my pain, and I can express it through music. And, I'm running away from all the abuse and all the shame and all of this and other. And I was just like, okay, this is dark. But with like, I always put like dark lyrics with like happier
Yes.
sounding music. I like love that juxtaposition. And so I kind of relate. I finished that. And I've always loved concept albums, like Pet Sounds or, I mean, Sgt. Pepper is technically a concept album. There's not really a through line with that. But like, for example, Pet Sounds is all about teenage love. Then, this young teenager feeling like he needs to get out on his own and experience the world. And then later on in the album, going back to like his first love and saying like, oh, where did your long hair go? Where is the girl I used to know? So it's kind of this whole, there's one through like thought throughout the whole album, and so I kind of thought, oh, we should make this kind of concept album that really takes you through like 3 acts of my life, where like the escape, the wanting to get out, the pressure being too much, then, looking and searching for love, and then finding love or maybe remembering a past love, and then the joy and triumph and hopefulness of the future, trying to get through all of this darkness. And then, so it kind of really, and then I was like, oh, it could be like on an airplane and we could take you through this musical journey through the skies
So
and guide
cool.
you through, you hear the flight attendants and the captain and there's turbulence and then the hard songs come on. And then, we dim the cabin lights and bring you blankets and pillows. And then all these like softer singer-songwriter songs come on. And then as we're coming in for the landing is like the hopeful and joyous, like, positivity for the future. And so I started constructing that whole thing and it became really the most like introspective autobiographical record because it took me 3.5 years to make the record. You go through literally like lyrics like, I'm moving my wife and son out to the islands to basically like get away. Like we're going to move out into some, middle of Hawaii somewhere and just live a nomadic life and be out of this Hollywood stuff. All the way to a song where it starts with like, I messed up my life. I lost my son and my wife. So you literally have this whole going from get out of here, take my family, this and that to, oh, now he's lost his family. Like he succumbed to, the pressure or whatever it was. And then getting through that, finding love, having a good relationship with your family, having a good relationship with your kids, and then having this hopeful thoughts for the future. And so it runs the whole gambit.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Pretty Litter.
You know what I say about cats this time of year?
What do you say?
Every cat's an indoor cat. They're freezing. It's freezing even if you're a cat. And when it's freezing outside, I'm an indoor human myself. If there's one thing that can really stink up being stuck inside, it's
Litter.
the litter box. Don't let that nasty smell ruin your winter wonderland. Switch to Pretty Litter like I did so many years ago. No joke, people. Pretty Litter's non-clumping formula traps odor. It really does, and traps moisture. It's ultra absorbent. It's lightweight, low dust. I say it's no dust, personally. 1 6-pound bag works for up to a month. Pretty Litter gives me total peace of mind because it changes color to indicate early signs of potential illness in my cat, like urinary tract infections, kidney issues, and so much more. Since Pretty Litter ships right to my door, I never run out. I don't have huge litter bags taking up space. I don't have to go out in the cold and lug those huge tubs from a store to my car and into my house. So much easier to store, so much easier to use. My kids complain a heck of a lot less because they don't have to change the litter as much, and it doesn't stink when they do. It's unbelievable. Indoor cats and indoor humans agree. Pretty Litter helps my house smell fresh and clean. Go to prettylitter.com/break to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. That's prettylitter.com/break to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/break.
Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Element.
Element helps anyone stay hydrated without the sugar and other dodgy ingredients found in popular electrolyte and sports drinks. Electrolyte deficiency or imbalance can cause so many things that you might think are caused by something else: headaches, cramps, fatigue, brain fog, weakness. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix born from the growing body of research revealing that optimal health outcomes actually occur at sodium levels 2 to 3 times government recommendations. Each stick pack delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients. Element is formulated for anyone on a mission to restore health through hydration. It's perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, those following keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets. We love Element, but Jonathan and his son are the biggest consumers of Element. We can barely stock it fast enough. I turn around and it's gone.
It's true. My son plays competitive tennis. He's using it every day. I wake up in the morning, I drink black coffee, and before I do, I have a little bit of Element. Helps me feel hydrated before I consume the coffee, which has a little bit of a dehydration effect. It balances it out. And the flavors, I gotta say, it is very, very tasty.
We also love Element's limited time chocolate medley, which includes chocolate mint, chocolate chai, and chocolate raspberry, which can be a new cozy ritual to warm up your day. You can mix any of these with hot water to enjoy on its own. It's kind of like hot cocoa, or add it to your favorite recipes. From health experts, everyone from famed Stanford neuroscientists to functional nutritionists to moms like me, exercise enthusiasts like Jonathan's son, heavy sweaters, sauna sitters, and those who want a dynamite no-sugar margarita or mocktail, incorporate Element into their daily routine. Get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinkelement.com/Mayim. Also, try Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water, or the hot chocolate medley, which is only available for a limited time. Try Element totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll refund your order, no questions asked. Again, for your free Element sample pack, go to drinkelement.com/Mayim. That's drinklmnt.com/Mayim. I can't help but wonder, when you think about some of these individual songs, right? And then the arc of this album. What would have happened to Drake Bell if you couldn't write this album?
Oh, I mean, honestly, it's therapy. I think that's why it took also so long to put out, because it just became, I'd write a song and I go, oh no, this has to go on. Like, this is telling the story. Like, if this is what we're really doing, like, this has to go on the record. This has to go on the record. And I was traveling so much, so I'd be recording in different studios and sending tracks to this place and that place and doing vocals here in this country and doing guitars and stuff and sending stuff and getting it all. It was like a huge puzzle. But it really, and I don't know. There's also something to listening to the album that's therapeutic as well. Like just sitting back and putting the headphones on, and because it's so many songs. Very often I'm listening to the record and I forget.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I forgot about this song.
Hmm.
Oh, this song's the one that's next. Oh wow. Oh wow. Listen to that lyric, and then you always write songs and intend for them to have whatever meaning you're
Mhm.
trying to write at that moment. But then you always go back and you're like, whoa, that lyric could mean something totally
Right.
different. And whoa, that can be interpreted in a completely different way. And then you actually like take things from things that you've written, like hearing it for the first time or taking it a different way. And so it's super therapeutic.
I wonder if you can help us with some of the timeline,
Yeah.
because many of us, kind of got to rethinking about you in a
Mhm.
new way when Quiet on Set came out.
Yeah.
But you obviously had been going through all of the things that the documentary talked about for years.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can fill us in on when sort of the writing began
Mhm.
and in what stage of your recovery, as it were, from all of the things that had happened to you. Where did it fit in therapeutically? Like, what is the timeline? Because, like I said, so many of us, when did the documentary come out?
It was April of this year.
It came out, right.
March.
Right. So it came out but this had been going on.
Yeah.
And without naming names, like some of us had been hearing about echoes of it before
Yeah.
and choosing not to comment about it.
Yeah.
But give us a little bit of the timeline.
They had been approaching me for quite a while. And there was another documentary that came out a while ago that was dealing with the same subject matter, and they reached out to me and asked me to be a part of it, and I was just not in a place where I wanted to talk about this. I was busy working. It was just like, no thanks. And they sent me back like the most tardy email, just like, it's people like you, why the Hollywood won't get fixed, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, people like me? What are you talking about? I'm like, go after the people who did it. Like, don't
Right.
send me a message like, well, you think this is a little triggering, this email? Like, so I was like, okay, they're obviously just for a cash grab, or they don't care about, victims. They're just like, how could you literally send me like a scathing email because I don't want to be a part of your little movie, like whatever. So I was very on guard. So when the producers from Quiet on Set reached out, I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They, I forget how they got my phone number, but I think somebody reached out to me. It was like, someone's trying to get a hold of you. So I okayed it. It wasn't like they like got my number and texted me. I think I okayed it. Like someone was like, oh, someone's trying to get a hold of you, whatever. So they started texting me, and we were like kind of talking over text, and I was just like, I'm not interested. Like, this is not something I would ever want to be a part of.
Why? Can you tell us why?
Just because there's like this whole stigma of like, what are people going to think? What are people going to say? How am I going to be viewed? I think especially, I mean, I don't want to say especially, but this is only talking from my experience. But, as a guy too, it's like, I don't want to there's like so many, and which eventually I was sort of correct, because I didn't know about these letters of support. I mean, knew they existed, but I was expecting like, close friends, family, like, of course, whatever. But when they unsealed them for this documentary, I got slapped with 41 letters from people I thought were my friends throughout my career, and like for years after, that I worked with, that were my friend. And I'm reading these letters that are like,
and these are people going out of their way to
say like, oh my gosh, it's Drake's fault. He tempted this man. Drake's an overtly blah blah blah. He's this and that. And I'm like, dude, I was 14. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. Like, I just was hanging out. Like what I was saying, like, oh, you go to these parties, you're just like hanging out. You don't think like your mind's not even there. I hadn't like my first girlfriend at this time. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't some like teen heartthrob actor, like making my way through Hollywood with all these chicks. Like I was so like,
but
in that part of the world, I was like, I'm still like trying to get to first base. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and the things that these letters say are just like as if I was just some like heathen, like jumping on the laps and grabbing and doing I was just like, this is unreal. This is unreal.
I also
And
just want to
all
make
deflecting. You know?
Well, yeah, and I just want to make space for the fact that you should not have to defend any behavior that you had, right? Meaning like it was putting you in this position to have to defend your behavior when you were a vulnerable child.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what so many of us found so disturbing. Was the accusation that a child could seduce
Exactly.
an adult.
Exactly.
But I do think it does get underlined because you are male.
Yeah.
And we are not used to hearing these things, and it brings up different levels of discomfort because it should be incredibly uncomfortable no matter what.
Yeah.
But it does. It brings up different levels of this. So you didn't want to participate.
Not at all.
So what changed?
My son's mom was kind of getting over LA. She was like done. She's like, it was like pandemic had hit. So she went to Florida with my son, and I stayed back and was going to like pack up and all this stuff. And I started to kind of spiral, and I was I was home alone, and I started to just kind of I think maybe being asked to do the documentary and knowing that something was going to come out, and it just, I lost it, and I had been sober for like 7 years, like hadn't drank and nothing. And I, go to what works. And I just kind of started spiraling out of control, and not getting crazy or anything, just too much was going on in my head. And I was just like, how am I going to get through this? So I finally hit rock bottom and went to rehab. And I went to this great place in Nashville. And for the first time, I was kicking and screaming, and knew I should go, but I didn't want to go. And then I was like, what am I doing? And then I get on the plane, and I'm like, oh my God, like what is going, So finally I got there, and it was like this beautiful, just trees everywhere. And it was just, it's Nashville. It's like, I'm from LA, like, there's just this huge fields and grass. And I finally took a deep breath. I like got out and I got my, it was so funny. I was getting my blood drawn, and this really sweet nurse in there, they take your picture, and they printed it out for my little badge tag. And I look at the badge tag, and I go, and she's like drawing my blood, and I go, oh my God, is that what I look like?
Wow.
Why do I look like that? And she goes, honey, because you're in rehab. It's like, oh my God. Like,
what did you see?
Terrible. I was like, I looked like a mess. I mean, I didn't look like a mess. I mean, I didn't really go to rehab because I was like, oh, I can't stop doing drugs or alcohol or something like that. It was really like, if I don't go somewhere, like, I mean, not that I'm going to hurt myself or anything. I didn't know. I didn't know what the heck. Like, I was like, I'm never going to work again, or I'm going to destroy all of my relationships. Like, I don't know what the
it might
outcome's
occur to me to hurt myself in that situation.
I mean,
I just want to give you the leeway to be like,
I mean,
it's with what was going on in your head, that's unmanageable.
No clue, unmanageable. That's basically a great word for it. It was just unmanageable. So I went, and that's what I saw when I looked at my badge. I was just like, oh yeah. But I'm like, why do I look like it? Because you're in rehab. That's why you look like that. It's okay. You're gonna get better. But so I spent a month there, and it was the first time that I'd done a lot of like one-on-one therapy and things, but it was the first time that I've been in group settings where people are telling stories and telling their life, and you're just like, whoa, okay, I'm not the only one. Like, all right, that story. Okay, well, I'll totally share my story, because that story I just heard is whoa. Like, all right, like I thought I had it bad. Like, okay, I'll share, and then you're getting it off your chest. There's no internet, there's no phones, there's no access to the outside world. You're literally on lockdown from 8 a.m. You go to class, and you're in class, different classes and therapy sessions and all this stuff, all the way up until 8, 9 o'clock at night when you hit your bed and the lights are out, and you just do it all over again every single day. And so I wasn't on Twitter reading crap and reading things about me that are devastating. It is just, I was completely removed. And so when I came out of that, I was like, oh, this is great, you know? And so I had now at this point talked a lot about what I'd gone through in my past and in a setting that wasn't just one-on-one with my therapist and, you know, and getting a lot of support and having people around me that just wanted to see me get better. No ulterior motives of, you know, nobody had their phones. Nobody's trying to take selfies with you. Nobody could call home and be like, hey, who's in my cabin? Like, we all just were on this level, you know, it's this whole level field, and it was this camaraderie and just giving attaboys and seeing people grow and get better and seeing people lose their shit and, you know, and not and reacting in a way that's like more loving and understanding. And, you know, because obviously there's people dealing with all different sorts of things. So, you know, you'll see one of the nicest guys in your cabin all of a sudden blow up, and you're just like, you know, in a normal setting, you're like, okay, that guy needs to leave. We can't be around him. But in this setting, it's more of, you know, we all need to gather around this guy right now. Like, he's hurting. Like, we need to help him and bring him, you know, get him back down to earth. And so it was just like all done from a different angle than what would happen in like the real world, you know? And so when they reached out to me again, I was like, you know, if I'm going to, and I think a lot of people, what was happening with everyone was after someone shared some wild story that you couldn't even imagine, you know, and uh, afterwards, we would all go up and support each other. Like, hey, man, thank you for sharing. Like, that just like, you know, I had this thing, like, I've been wanting to talk about my relationship with my dad and, you know, you lost your dad. And I'm like, my dad's still here. Like, I need to mend that because even though I have this with my dad, like, you don't have an opportunity to even fix stuff with your dad because he's gone or whatever it is. Like, it all was like supportive. And people coming up to me and saying the same thing, you know, like, oh, that story really helped me. Like, oh my gosh, you know, you've had I love when you share, because it's like, I share such similar situations in my life.
Did it also help hearing from other men
Totally.
who had been victimized?
Totally. And that's the thing. I mean, I would sit there and hear these stories that were like, you couldn't even imagine that these things happen in real life. Like, you're like, that, you can't even put that in a movie. Like, that's too harsh to even, like, that would have to only be in a book. Like,
but you understand that when a lot of people heard your story, many of us felt that way.
Yeah.
How could this happen?
Yeah.
How could this happen to a person?
Yeah.
So the fact that like a group setting allowed that opening, I think, you know, the joke I always make is like, it's good to have friends who are more fucked up than you.
Yeah.
Because you can always like feel like, oh, but at least.
Totally.
But also it's about perspective, meaning
Yeah.
some people would hear your story and say, even though it may not have the most horrific details like this other story,
right,
the context in which what happened to you might for some other people be like, oh my God.
Exactly.
How do you recover from that, right?
Yeah,
That's that interchange of information that happens in therapy and especially in a group.
Yeah, and I think that had a lot of impact on me deciding to actually do the documentary, because
Right.
I was like, okay, if I'm ever going to tell my story, what is it going to be on a podcast? Is it going to be like in an interview that some people read in Newsweek? Like, you know, if I'm going to get my story out, then maybe it should be on something that, obviously we did not know what the impact and that this thing was going to be, you know, the success that it was going to have. It's weird.
It's a weird word.
I know.
I feel weird about using that too.
Weird word to use.
But it's impact.
Impact. That's a better word.
Yeah.
What kind of impact that it would have.
Well, there were really two components also. And I wonder if you knew that when you went into the documentary. There were two components. There was kind of like the climate on set component. And, you know, I'm sort of a documentary aficionado. It's like sort of my jam. And what I felt about Quiet on Set was that it was really stretched out. Like, like it kind of got like taffied out, right? Like it felt a little bit like that taffy machine. And like, I feel like we could have communicated the same things in a shorter, but not, you know, it's not for me to say, but there was kind of a whole part of the documentary and then there was you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm amazed our paths have not physically crossed.
Yeah.
You know, like I knew a lot of people that you knew and,
Yep.
anyway. But I will never forget the moment in that documentary when you sat down in that chair. First of all, you're very handsome.
Thank you.
And you have beautiful hair. And, you have this kind of like, this way you're very kind of, very like Rat Pack, you kind of like, you glide into that set and you have a presence about you. But I will never forget seeing you and wondering what it was like to sit in that fucking chair.
Brutal. It was,
And that's why I
so
really wanted to
weird.
talk to you.
Because
I
it
wanted
was the
to know
first
what that
time
was
that
like.
I'd ever said anything publicly, and there's a camera in my face. I mean, it was brutal, and I didn't know how in depth I was going to get. Like, I mean, it was like pulling teeth to even get me to be a part of it. And then it was shot in 2 days.
Wow.
And the first day I went home, and I was like, "What did I just do? What did I just do?" I called the producers. I was like, "I'm sorry, I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
Wow.
I'm losing my mind. Like, I
What did
I'm
they say?
They were. It's obvious. It goes back to that,
Yeah.
which is kind of a bummer because it does go back to that sort of like
They have a story to tell.
they have a story to tell. They have a job to do. They've got money on the line. They've got this whole thing, and so, but they did work it out well where it wasn't, when they were like, "Well, just look, come down. We'll just go upstairs and we'll just talk until you either feel comfortable or you decide not to do it. But would you mind just coming down and like us discussing with you and talking it through with you?"
What does that feel like in your body when you don't want to go back and you do? And I'm not asking to disparage the producers or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious with what you know about your process of what it feels like to be torn between things. What did that feel like in your body?
I mean, it's a completely physical reaction. It's really it's like fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. And it's like just going through it like because there's so much going on in your mind where you're thinking you're used to, "Oh man, I just got this phone call that really upset me," or something happened in my life and I'm really, really upset, but I have a scene that I have to shoot in 10 minutes that I have to be laughing and having a great time. And
that's called compartmentalization.
Yeah. So you're just like, and then you're like, get to set and you're like, "All right, let's do it," and you're just like in your head. I'm so used to that.
Right.
So there was that, as well as like, but wait, this is like your story. This is your life. This is what's happened to you. Like, you're telling something that you have held inside of you forever. And only people close to you know about it. And 41 other people who wrote letters of support. And an entire courtroom full of people. But it's this whole physical like tug of war that you're going, okay, do I just suck it up and like get through it because, the cameras and lights are already set up, the crew's already here.
Right.
And then you're like, wait a minute, bro, you're not just acting. Like, this is your story. Like, you need to really think about and figure out, like, is this something you want to do? You're not just getting through the day. This is not just,
Did you know the impact it would have in terms of, I really would love to kind of like set aside all the like, oh my God, and all the gossipy stuff and all the stupid stuff. I want to set that aside. What you did was you gave voice to an experience that people have all over the world all the time.
Yeah.
And not just famous people.
Totally.
And not just celebrity people. You became inadvertently the face of like bravery around owning your own story, right? Did you have any idea that would happen?
No idea. And I think that's one of the really cool things about being on tour and traveling so much is I'm constantly in the airport and people are walking up to me, and instead of just like, "Hey, can I grab a selfie?" It's like, "Hey, do you mind? Can I share my story with you?" And this happened to me and I've never spoke about it, but when I saw you sit down and you were telling your story, like, I opened up to my husband, and now we've in our state, they're now drafting legislation, and we were a huge catalyst for that. And we're working on this because in schools, you can still get a job if you're this. And so I've had so many situations like that where just like walking on the street, it's usually like, oh my gosh, can I get a selfie? Cool, thanks. No way. See ya. Now it's like people coming up and be like, do you mind if can I just talk to you for a couple minutes? And then it turns into like a 25-minute conversation of people sharing their stories and talking about how, nobody in my family ever knew about this, and I'm finally able to talk about it. And so that's something I definitely didn't expect at all.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Does it feel like too much sometimes?
Sometimes, but I mean that it is always going to be an emotional roller coaster of like, can you see the dog, or does it just look weird that I'm doing something with my hands under here? I'm playing with the dog. So if it just looks like he's like, what is he doing under that table? It's a dog. So it's that emotional roller coaster of like, and then also, going on podcasts, and no offense on this, but like, it's
Yeah.
like talking about it again and then talking
course.
about it. But when you have reactions like that, it's like, there's good that comes out of it. It's like, it's like the lyric when I'm like, I kind of relate. I found beauty in my pain. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, even though you've been through these painful situations, like there is a beauty that you can find on the other side of it.
Well, I mean, we're so appreciative that you were open to talking, but we also, we're really kind of careful around this in terms of like, people fetishize that documentary, and they kind of fetishize the information and feel like we get to own you, right? And like, well, he said all those things, and what does he expect? But there still is an amount of agency that I think is so important. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, there's kind of like a tragic ripple effect when you've experienced the kind of things that you talk about and the kind of things that people come up to you and talk about. And you talk a lot, and it's in your music, about mistakes you've made. And um I don't think you have to defend, justify, argue anything, about anything that you've done, but I wonder if you can share with people who might be feeling conflict around the kind of expansiveness that trauma brings to your life. Meaning, it touches so many more places than the original place that it came from. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, however generally or specifically as you want to.
Yeah, I think that there's something, especially when it happens, I think there's a stunted growth that happens. You're kind of sometimes locked in like the age it happened, and you are expected so much from this world when you're like, okay, now I'm in my 20s. I can make excuse. Oh, now I'm in my 30s. You're like, wait, but I've been dealing with this stuff my whole life, and I think there's like a stunted growth, and then I think that there's like also, I found what it was for me is like, and I think because it was like at an age where I was coming, I was getting my first girlfriend, and I was coming of age, and I was like, what does it mean to be a man, and what does it mean to be in relationships and be desired? And oh, now that this has happened to me, like, was like my manhood stripped from me, and am I going to be desired by people? And then you're in a situation where you are, even though you're going on stage and girls are screaming your name and there's all this adulation and people are like, oh man, if I could just have that. But it's not, when you walk off stage and you still feel totally alone, and you don't know how to navigate properly through relationships, and you don't know, there's just so many tools that you don't have, and boundaries you don't know how to set, because boundaries have been just completely just red rovered your whole life. And so you, and then just the feeling of just wanting to be accepted or wanting to be appreciated or wanting to be admired, or, you know, that becomes sort of a drug in itself, and so it leads to a lot of loneliness and a lot of um, self-destructive behavior. Um, but I think that one of the things that has really helped is, I talk to so many people that are just like, oh, I hate therapy, or I hate talking to doctors, or I hate talking about it. Like, no, you don't need to talk about it. Really is like, it's really the only way to get through it is if you don't hold it inside for so long.
Well, and part of when abuse happens to children,
Yeah.
that's part of the formula.
Yep.
Is you have to hold it
Keep
inside.
a secret. Yeah.
Right. It's not an isolated incident.
Totally.
That can be like, oh, this happened to me, and
Yeah.
you run home and tell your parents, right?
Yeah.
I think the boundary point is a really important one to underscore,
Yeah.
because when a child's boundaries are violated, they do not develop a sense of boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's not that like, I don't believe in boundaries or fuck boundaries.
No,
it's like
it's
your
not.
brain has not processed boundaries.
Yeah. No, it's not
Yeah.
it's not oh, my parents told me not to, but F that, I'm going to stay
Correct.
out later than my curfew anyway. Like,
Right.
no, it's not. It's like what feel like should be natural boundaries
Right.
that you don't even know are there. They're just natural for you, have been completely steamrolled, and that you're like, what is it just sets you up for it can set you up for disaster.
For sure. And I think that's also a really important point that you make. The things that we do are the things we do to try and cope with those feelings.
Totally.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand
Consciously
or
or
misunderstand.
subconsciously.
Correct.
But
a lot of people are like, oh, he drinks too much, or she takes drugs and that's
Yeah.
bad, or she has this other compulsive behavior, right?
Yeah.
And what it is it's a thing to try and numb what it's feeling like.
But the person who's executing those behaviors might not even know that that's why.
Correct.
They're just like, oh, I'm predisposed to alcoholism, or I'm,
right.
I was a wild kid. So yeah, I did some drugs and I did this and I was promiscuous and I, did this and that. But the person often sometimes like, it's like, well, that's just my makeup. Like, that's just who I am. I'm wild and crazy. And
I'm always like, where's the trauma?
yeah,
It's in there somewhere.
And that's what a lot of people don't get to the heart of and get to the bottom of like, wait, like, I know who I am in my heart and who I would like to portray myself, like how I would like the world to view me is like who I really am. So why the hell am I doing all this crap? Why do I keep getting into this kind of trouble? Why do I keep doing these stupid things? Like, is that just the half of my mom and half of my dad, the suck part? Like, and then you really, when you get into situations or environments like group therapy and places where people who care about you, and you're starting to talk about it and really unearth these things and you discover so much that, because you replay kind of the same movie in your head over and over and over. And then when you really start to dissect it, you're like, oh, I forgot about that. And I forgot about that. And I forgot about that. And all this stuff starts coming back that you've just like locked down. It allows you to realize like, wait a second. I'm not lying to myself. Like, I know who I am and who I, strive to be. And not to make excuses for the behavior, but at least find reasons and ways to, if you got a leak in your roof and you just think that, just go turn there must be a faucet on somewhere, but it's like, no, there's a hole in your roof. Like but you're not looking at like what is causing this leak. Like, you're just going to think, oh, okay, my roof just leaks. Like that's what it is, but if you can go, oh, because A, B, C, D, now I can tackle those things and realize like, that's what's affecting my mind.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the positive things that have kind of come out of this? I think that people obviously know, that you and Josh and, you and Miranda were obviously so incredibly close. Were those kind of relationships that felt supportive? Did you seek out, support? You talk about in the documentary your girlfriend at the time who was sort of the one who helped you
Yeah.
step out of the secrecy
Yeah.
and the shame. And I know that she, obviously saw the documentary, but can you talk a little bit about, either your co-stars or other people in that world
me
who
and
felt
her got to
supportive?
rekindle a great friendship, because that, at the end of the day, when we were so young when we were dating, that we were just best friends and we were just so close. And so it really was interesting talking to her after the documentary. And obviously she was someone who knew everything that had happened. Really seeing like the impact that it just doesn't have on me, but that it had on my people I loved around me. And yeah, I mean, it was really wild hearing her perspective, and just her journey through life was completely affected by this situation as well. And she's awesome, and we've gotten to rekindle our friendship, which is really nice. And yeah, I mean, people like Josh, or I was really close to, like, for example, Jonathan Goldstein, who played the dad on the show, a lot of the producers and writers and people and stuff. And so yeah, I mean, it's, and throughout the time of working on the show, there was obviously people who knew what had happened and stuff that were close to the show. And that was really where I found my solace and was able to feel safe. And I, unfortunately, for the way the documentary portrays life on set, for me, my experience was life on set was the safe escape from what I was going through. When I was on set, I felt protected, I felt safe, I felt and especially even after it happened, even more so with the support that I had. I grew closer to people. I was, I really felt, I don't know, I felt like during the documentary, on some aspects of it, I was kind of like it's a bummer that this is getting kind of such bad light, because my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, but was when I got to set, I was like, oh, thank God,
You were away from your
I'm
predator.
away from my predator. I'm able to be around people I love. I'm able to get to do what I love to do. And does it get stressful sometimes? Yeah, but you should have been on that movie that I was working on in Canada at 3, or in Romania at 3:00 in the morning with no child labor laws and having to do 26-hour days. And, so I had already, the stress for me was just like being at work.
Were you and Josh and were you that close?
Yeah, but I mean, Josh and I would obviously, we started so young, and we were growing and going through our adolescence. So there would be times when we were like inseparable, we'd be like, finish work and, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to go home and play PlayStation. All right, I'll meet you there, And I'm like, we just spent 12 hours together, and now we're at home like playing games and ordering pizza.
But that's kind of how friendships work.
Yeah.
It's like you spend more time with those people than you do with anyone. And also, I remember this when Joey and Jenna and I would hang out. It was like they understood exactly what my day was like.
Yeah.
When you tried to hang out with like, kids from school, or like
Totally.
they didn't, it was like they
Didn't
had
get
a whole, it was a different universe.
Yep, totally different universe.
Yeah.
But then there was also times where I was like, I'm only talking to Josh if it says it in the script. Okay? Otherwise.
Kind of like us.
Yeah, otherwise, keep him away from me. And I'm sure he felt the same way.
Because those were just normal teenage, ups and downs that you would go through.
Completely.
I wonder if you can, just one more question about sort of like the documentary. And as I said, there were these kind of like two components. And, I had a lot of feelings even before, your part of the documentary started, in terms of, things that we were told were acceptable on sets. Just like even things that weren't necessarily, let's say, abusive. Just there was a standard of behavior and decorum that by today's standards were just not okay, right? And Amanda Bynes is someone who, like, there's references to it, and there's all this speculation, about sort of not just her, but about this ripple effect that these kind of sets, have on people. And I wonder if you have a different perspective now as an adult of kind of what you experienced, what it's like for young people operating in an adult world, kind of with everything that you've seen and also everything you've been through.
Yeah, I think that there was I mean, and I'm only speaking from my experience,
Sure.
but there definitely was a adult atmosphere while working on a children's show, but not nearly as much as if I was working on a guest spot on an NBC show or a guest spot on an ABC show, like where they weren't these standards and practices of like, hey, we're making shows with kids, for kids, like we need to keep up a decorum on set. Whereas if you're working on a show that's for adults that just happen to have a kid in it,
That's interesting.
your experience is totally more, you're going to hear some, working blue at lunch. Like you're going to hear some stories that you're
but
like,
I
whoa,
will say,
like,
I wasn't really a Nickelodeon watcher.
Yeah.
I was a little bit older, than you and already like just annoyed with television in general, just because I was like living and breathing it and it was like coming out of my ears. But I have to say, there were some things like the, what was it? The Ariana Grande stuff?
Yeah.
I was like, how did this happen? What is happening?
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
there's
it was
always.
like that seemed like a joke to me.
Yeah.
Like if you would see that on an SNL skit and be like, wouldn't it be funny if a kid's
show did
like
this.
some of it went really far and
Yeah.
like my jaw was on the floor. I was like,
Yeah.
wait a second. This is weird.
Yeah, I
like
think
weirder
that
than I thought.
I think there's weird, and because of some of the, it's like going and seeing a Pixar movie with your kids.
Is it?
Like, there's jokes in Toy
Sure.
Story 3
Okay, but they're not
that
like
you cannot explain to your children.
okay, but they're not like overtly sexual and like
They're absolutely overtly sexual. The stuff between Barbie and Ken,
oh, that's
the stuff between, I mean, you are not going to explain these jokes to a child.
right.
But it's
You
more
know?
of like double entendres and verbal jokes than
Yeah.
it is
This surprised me.
That is
dramatizing.
dramatizing.
This
Well, I think
surprised me.
also the difference is too is you're working with live actors versus animation. So you're actually putting people in
Sure.
these situations that are not just
It felt,
animated.
I'm just saying it felt weird.
Yeah.
I just want
Yes,
to go on the record
and
saying
the
that.
water bottle scene
Yeah.
where she's
Yes, we don't
being
need to describe it.
dramatized, it just feels like overtly exploitive.
Yeah, I think that there's two. I think that that's a double-edged sword, though. I think that there is, because there are things that are questionable.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you're looking at
Right.
every single
Sure.
thing as questionable when it's like, that's just a pie in the face.
Right.
Kids like funny words.
Right.
Kids think it's funny if you say, like for example, they're like, oh, there's too much about feet. Well, I have a 3-year-old. And you know what? If I tell him some sophisticated joke from Frasier, he's like, huh? But if I grab his feet and I go, oh, you have taco feet.
Right.
It's the funniest thing he's ever heard in his life.
Yeah.
You know, he's
It's finding
dying
that
laughing.
balance,
Do it again,
right.
Dada. Do it again. Do it again. No, my feet don't smell like
Right.
tacos. Yeah, you have taco feet. It's the funniest thing. Well, now you put it in here and it's like, oh,
Taco feet.
why is he making so many feet jokes? Well, because that's what kids laugh at.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that there was obviously things that pushed the envelope and things that put people in situations that maybe they
Right.
felt uncomfortable in.
And when you group them all together,
and then didn't feel because they were not at an age or had the experience to be like, no, next joke. Like, I'm not doing the potato gag. Give me something else. No, I'm not going to do the water gag. Give me something else. They don't have that feeling of they can go up to the,
Their
whoever's in
parent.
charge or
Their
their parents or their
parents,
parents can
right.
step
And they
in.
might not have been listened to anyway.
And that's what I'm saying.
there's huge
That's
pressure.
what
There's
I'm
huge
saying.
pressure.
Yeah. But when you put them all together, I think that there is a little bit of like what's been happening on YouTube. I watch these things get put together and I'm like, okay, like 3 or 4 of those, I could say, all right, that shouldn't have been on a kid's show. But this is a 20-minute video of like somebody getting squirt with something in the face. I'm like, that's a pie in the face.
Right.
That's not trying to look like, but then there are other things like,
Yeah.
even on Drake and Josh, like when I spray the suntan lotion all over the kid and then Josh comes in and goes, what's all over your, never mind, I don't want to know. You're like, okay, well, obviously that's a reference to something. Like you wouldn't be like, what's all over your face? It's got suntan lotion all over it. Obviously that's a reference to something.
Right.
But I think that there is a little grouping them all together and going like,
Yeah.
like, dude, like, sorry, if I tell my, if I'm like, oh, I feel uncomfortable. I got cheese in my pants. It's like, oh, why are they talking about what's inside of a child's pants? It's like, dude, it's a something funny that,
Right.
oh, bring me the ointment. Like,
Right.
ointment's a funny word. Like, we're not trying to take that anywhere. But then there are things that I think
Well, they lose
lend to-
credibility when they
lose-
step over the line like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you lose trust in,
Exactly.
do they know what's appropriate?
Right.
You live in Mexico primarily.
I'm in Mexico a lot. I was recording my last record that we just released. And so I don't officially live in Mexico,
Got
but
it.
I may as well because I'm there quite a bit.
Do you otherwise live out of a suitcase?
Yes.
What is that
Yeah.
like?
It's fun, you know. I mean, especially right now because the record just came out, and so we're on tour. We started out off in Mexico, and now I'm back here doing shows in the States. We had a bunch of shows, and then next year we go deeper into Latin America, and then
Amazing.
off to Europe. And
I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your music. Do you speak Spanish?
I speak enough.
You sing in Spanish.
Yes.
But you also sing in English.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did this come about, your kind of music foray in Latin America?
Well, I put out an album in 2006 called It's Only Time.
Mm.
And we went on this big tour in the US. And it was doing pretty well. And, you know, but we were also billed with a couple of other acts that were pulling in a lot of people. So, you know, we were playing big places like Irvine. Well, I think it's changed the name since, but Irvine Amphitheater and Hollywood Bowl, like big places. But we were pulling in, wasn't just my band. You know?
Sure. Right. You're not headlining.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
It was like
your-
a co-headline thing. And so when we would play by ourselves, you know, we pull in like 500, 1,000 people.
There's a lot
it
of
was like,
people.
it was the first, I mean, my first record I put out independently, my second record, this is the first record on a label,
Right.
first song that had gotten any traction or anything. But we booked some shows in Mexico, and only time I'd been in Mexico is, you know, growing up in Southern California. And it's
Right.
like, oh, it's the summertime. Me and my brothers and family are going to go to Tijuana and Rosarito and
Right.
hang out, you know, just cross the border for a couple days. And
Right.
that was like my experience in Mexico. I'd never been to Mexico City or Guadalajara or
Right.
Monterrey or anything like that. And we had some shows booked in Mexico, and I really had no idea what we were walking into, you know? And we landed at the airport, and it was like the Beatles at
Wow.
JFK. It was like, what is going on? You know, who's on our flight? You know, who's coming? And they all had signs and fans. You know, it was just mayhem. It was total like the opening of Hard Day's Night. You know, they're like
Wow.
chasing the SUVs, and they're outside every interview that I go in to do the radio stations. And you know, they're like, oh, you're playing Auditorio Nacional. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, is that a club? Or like, I have no idea. I'm totally
Sure.
walking in
You're
blind.
just like booked, and this is where you're
and
going
so
next.
I go in to do something like this, and it's basically like their Kiss FM. I'm interviewing with like their Ryan Seacrest. It's like the biggest radio station and DJ. And he's like, you know, it's quite an honor to be playing at the National Auditorium, and you have 2 shows there. And, you know, what does that feel like? I'm like, feels great. I don't know. Like, it's cool. Like, I don't even know what it should, but it's an honor, really? Like, I'm like, what's going on? And then at the end of the interview, we do, you know, how you do liners. You're like, hey, what's up? This is
Right,
Mayim
right.
Bialik, and you're listening to
Right.
KFWB. So, they were having me, they're like, okay, the first one, could you say, you know, thank the fans for keeping your song at number 1? And I'm like, what? Like on the station? Like number 1 where? Like at the taco shop? Like where is my song number 1? They're like, in the whole country. I'm like, what?
Wow. It's a big country to have a number 1 hit.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. You know, I mean, 8.5 million people just in Mexico City. And I turn around and I'm like, looking at my team, I'm like, what are you talking number? Okay. Hey, thanks for keeping my song at number 1. Like, nobody told me this? Like, what's going on? And then they're like, okay, next liner, could you say thank you for keeping your album at number 1? What? I'm like, what? The whole album's the number 1? He's like, you have the number 1 record in the country right now.
Wow.
Like, this is insane. So then we get to Auditorio Nacional, and we go to sound check, and I walk out onto the stage to do sound check, and I look at the audience, and I'm like, you know, all these empty seats. It's like 10,000, 15,000 empty seats. And I'm like, oh, they think that we're good. Like, guys, hey, do they think that we're going to sound like, there's only going to be people like in the front. Like, this is too big of a place. We might,
You
like, we
figure like 500 people will fill the front.
Yeah, I'm like, we need we need a smaller place, you know? And they're like, no, it's sold out.
Oh my God.
I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah. And actually we had to add a matinee show and that sold out too. So you have 2 shows here sold out today. I'm like, what?
Okay, I have a question though. When you're performing for 500 people,
Yeah.
that sounds like a lot of people. I mean, that is a lot of people. And, you know, I only know the acting side,
Yeah.
right? So I know what it's like to see 500 people in an audience.
Yeah.
As a musician, how different does that feel to like 5,000?
It's totally different, but also there's really cool things about them both. Like I was playing shows recently in Dallas and in Oklahoma City, and they're in clubs, smaller crowds.
Right.
But you have more of a connection with the people when it's a smaller
Right.
crowd. Like you can mess with them. Like a bunch of fans were like, I didn't know I was coming to see stand up too. Like, and that's something that wouldn't necessarily happen if I'm playing to like in Irapuato. We just had like 30,000.
What?
And you play to, it's more energetic. Like you come out with like a bang and you got the
Right.
fireworks and the dancers and the visuals and all this. But it's more like, I don't know, it's like you see like the first row and then it's just a sea of people. So it's like really, I mean, you get the energy
Right.
from the audience and you're putting on this huge rock
Right.
show and you're a lot more energy. But then when it's a smaller crowd, like you can make jokes and
Right.
you can pick someone out of the audience, or you've got the guy, you know, the free bird guy, or you've got the drunk guy who's like, enough of the story, just play the song, you know, and then you can like mess with him and then like get the audience to laugh. And so they're totally different experiences, but they both have like really cool aspects, you know, like walking out on stage to a sea of people. I mean, you feel like Elvis, you feel like a rock star. You're like, oh, this is incredible. And then you walk out on stage and you're like, to, you know, a couple hundred, and you're like, oh, I get to play tonight. Like I get to mess around.
Well, it's kind of funny because, and I think it relates to a lot of my acting experience and maybe yours as well. There's different levels of dissociation that you get to engage in as a performer. And it does depend a lot on like what's out there, right?
Totally.
Because when you think about, like when I would think about run through, right? So I don't know how your show worked, but like ours, we would do like a run through and it was just for, you know, 20 people, right? It was for the writers and the producers, and it was a very small group. And then the next day they would add network people, right? So it would kind of grow. But it's like your energy has to match, and your ability to invest in what other people want from you
Totally
changes, right? If it's 10 people and which 10 people. So I'm wondering for you as a performer, and especially with your experience as an actor, like, are there different levels of kind of like being able to check out and hide, you know, in a different way?
I don't know if it's like checking out and hiding. I think I mean, I love performing. I love being an entertainer. I grew up on all of the classic, like my dad raised me on Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin and Abbott and Costello. And I've loved, I mean, not that I would ever have the guts to do it, but like I'm obsessed with stand-up comedy. And I really have that. That's why I think like what you were saying is when there were points in our show where we had a live audience when we would tape on Friday night. And then there were points in our show where, also because our live audiences were usually younger people, and it's like, how are we going to wrangle these kids? You know, it's like you can only throw candy at them for so long until they're like, okay, we've seen this, you know. You go watch a show with the adults in the audience, they can watch the same scene 4 or 5 takes and see the different jokes and whatever. But when you got kids in the audience, they're like,
it's like moving
we've
along.
seen this, like next, like let's move on, you know? And audience, you know, adult audience, you can kind of say, they'll laugh at the same joke because they know they're like contributing to part of it. And then there were times when we didn't have a live audience. And so it was definitely a different, because I love to perform. I love to hear what's working, getting that instant gratification of, it's the difference between working on a live sitcom and then working on a movie. You know, it's like, oh, we're doing You're Single now. Okay, we got to turn around. All right, see you in 3 hours as we turn everything around. And then you do the same thing and you shoot like half a page a day and you're like, oh my God, how many more novels can I read in my trailer and go through the entire season of Sopranos? Like, it's just so boring. But when you work on a sitcom, you get that like, oh, Friday night. All right. Hey, the show's starting. Okay, we're loading the audience in. Like the lights are up. All the hair and makeup people are there. Everything. It's like it's more like theater. It's like, oh man, we got that energy of the live audience. So there definitely is a difference between doing a sitcom where you just have like the producer filling in the laugh track, like just one person laughing just to fill in.
There's always that one writer who's like,
so,
ha, 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 ha.
Yeah, and it's just so to give the actors the timing to say the next line because you don't want to step on the laughs. And so you're just like, I'm like, okay, that's not. I mean, our producer was very good at like making it seem like they were real laughs. Like it wasn't like ha 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 ha, like just for timing. Like it would work, but it's nothing like having an actual audience laughing at your.
Wait, I just want to
jokes.
I want to go through the different kinds of laughs there are, because there's also like the writer who laughs and then their face completely turns dead inside when they're done. It's like, ha ha ha. Like waiting for the next one, right?
Yeah.
There's like this whole variety
There's
of
always
laughs.
the writer who only laughs at their own jokes.
Oh, yes.
Like you could tell that they were fighting for this in the writer's room. And then the producer's finally like, okay, fine. And then there's the one writer that's like, just laughs at their own joke. And you're like, I know every line you wrote in this script.
But they're laughing like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, like, I told you. They do the hit. They do this. They got the rolled up script and they slap. They're like, told you it worked. Like, you're the only one laughing.
There's a laugh where the face is not laughing, but the sound comes out. Where they're just like, because they know they need to fill that time. I just did 4 different laughs that I've never thought about.
Ours was actually not. He was very good at making it sound like a real laugh. So it was never the same laugh. He would laugh. It was very boisterous and it was
convincing.
It worked.
Right.
But
a lot of that is about timing.
Yeah, it's all for timing, but nothing compares to having, an actual audience there.
Drake Bell, tell people where they can find you and where they can find your music.
Before we end this,
Before
we end this, it's my turn to interview you.
Okay.
Okay. So I've seen every single episode of Jeopardy. Actually, I take that back. Since I've been traveling so much this past year and a half, I have missed a lot because they don't play it in Mexico. And they don't stream it. They don't stream it as they should. Like I should be able to get every single episode of Jeopardy. And if that's possible and I'm on the wrong streaming network,
we can start a campaign.
Please tell me. But literally since Holzhauser's streak, I have not missed an episode of Jeopardy. I'm absolutely obsessed with the show. And I mean, even when we're on vacation in Hawaii, you guys play at 4:00. And there's 2 episodes. So you guys but you're on earlier in the day.
Right.
And so I will literally be like ziplining with friends or like
and have to make
on
it
a
back
hike. And I'm like, guys, it's 2:45. Like we have got to get back to the house to watch it live. Anyway, so what is it like hosting Jeopardy? Because they were going through all of the speculation of who the hosts were going to be. And
yes, I should say you've missed an interesting year.
Okay.
I am no longer the host of Jeopardy, but I did have a very, very enjoyable run.
Yeah.
So when they did all the celebrity kind of tryouts, I never in a million years thought that I would be selected, which I eventually was. I had an unbelievable time doing it.
Yeah.
And largely because the amount of information that I got to learn on a daily basis was just so exciting. Like things that I never, would get to know about.
Mm-hmm.
And it was incredible, but I was working on a television show at the time. And so I was on Call Me Kat for 3 years. So I was bouncing between and like every hiatus week going to do Jeopardy. And, we do a bunch in a day.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting. We did Celebrity Jeopardy, which was really fun because I also got to like meet incredible people that I wanted to meet. But I consider it's stressful in a positive way because there's so much precision required.
That's what I was going to ask you. It's like
so much precision required.
How nervous are you to like read every question correctly,
and
know how to put
correctly,
the emphasis on the right,
Yep.
How do you say what was Alex's always his genre, like how do you pronounce this word correctly?
Alex also spoke French, and they very quickly realized, she doesn't speak French. I speak other languages, but not French. But it was intense, is how I would describe it.
Do you get to see obviously,
You get
like,
the clues.
what do you get? Do you get
the clues the night
only
before.
only the clues?
The clues the night before. Well, with the answers, because you have to be able to answer them in case they don't answer them. So you have to
so
learn
you have
all
clues
the
and answers.
clues and answers. You either get them the night before or the next
then you get
morning.
ability to. So when
You practice a little bit, but not a lot.
but if you have something, a joke to reference with the thing, or you have
Yes.
something, some
correct
random facts
But
about
mostly,
it,
it's
or-
also, it's a very different thing than being an actor or a performer because you want to highlight the guests, right? So
yeah.
you want to kind of give that space for them.
Yeah.
And some guests are, more anxious than others
Yeah.
or nervous or not very chit-chatty. But yeah, having to kind of come up with interview questions. But there's also a very, very skilled staff. And it's
Mhm.
actually a Writers Guild show. And so those members of the Writers Guild work their butts off to
Okay.
write both the clues and also to help with sort of the whole vibe of how you speak to contestants.
Yeah,
and
I would love to. I mean, I don't know if I could host because it just looks like the most stressful
It's
job in
very
the world.
intense.
Even though Alex made it look like the easiest job on the
It was
planet.
incredible.
But I know it's like, I just watched that and I'm like, this has got to be the most stressful. And then going up and interviewing them after the commercial break, and you're like, just these random people from these random towns that have never been on TV.
It's incredible though.
and
But you
you're
meet
like-
amazing people. You
you're
meet
like-
amazing people.
You're like, tell me that funny story about your dog. And they're like, oh, my dog went out in the snow and then he came back in and he got snow all over our living room. And you're like,
well, here's
the story? That out of your whole life? That's what you shared on Jeopardy?
Here's a promise I will make you. If I ever get to host again, I'm going to reach out to you and bring you with me.
Do it, because I would love it.
Please tell people where they can find your album, All Things Drake Bell.
The album's streaming everywhere you stream music, Spotify, iTunes, everywhere. And I'm Drake Bell on everything. So just Drake Bell on Instagram and Facebook
Awesome.
and X and
Thank
all that
you.
stuff.
Thank you so much for being here. We
Yeah,
really
thank you.
appreciate you opening up and talking
Yeah,
so
thank you for
intimately
having me.
with us. And from our breakdown to the one we hope you never have. We'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two. One fiction, and now she's gonna break down